What's up, what's up? This is your homeboy, Alfonso Gucci Gang Muchacho, and I'm back, and through the magic of YouTube, I'm going to tell you how to make melodic music without actually understanding all the complexities of music theory. So, what does this actually mean? This means I'm going to explain the bare minimum you need to know to be able to create tracks whilst remaining in key and not making people want to pull their teeth out because your bass line is out of tune with the rest of your track. One thing to bear in mind throughout all of this is we're making electronic music here. We are not scoring a film or writing a Gustav Holst tribute. This means we don't really need to know a whole lot to get a track made. It's an advantage to know a few chord progressions, but honestly, as long as you know which notes are in the right key, you're probably good to go. So, if you look at all the new releases on Beatport, you'll probably notice that a lot of these tracks are in A minor. This is probably because A minor is the simplest of all keys to learn. It's all the white keys. Hit a white key, hit another, and you've probably written a track in A minor. But wait, C major is also made up of all the white keys too. How do you know the difference? My personal view is, if you're only looking to learn a bit of music theory so you can make a techno track, there's no need to worry too much about this sort of thing. There's a lot of discussions and arguments online about the difference between A minor and C major and a whole host of other different combinations. I think you only need to know what notes are in what key. So, how do you work all this out? If you're on Windows, you have a very handy free utility called Chords. Stupid name aside, this thing is an absolute godsend for anyone that doesn't have a grasp of music theory. It's got two modes. The first will show you what notes make up a chord. You can select your chord and easily see how to play it. Simple. You'll remember these fairly quickly once you've played a few. It's not something that you'll need to be referring to after producing for 10 years, but it's good to have as a sanity check early on. The second mode will show you all the notes that make up a key. So select your key, make sure you hit only those notes, and you'll probably be good to go. That's the really simple version anyway. There's a whole weird and wonderful world of scales out there, but because we're making music for people to dance mindlessly in dark rooms, you probably don't need to concern yourself too much with anything other than a major and minor. There are some tracks that use slightly different scales, but they are few and far between compared to the overwhelming majority. I'm not saying you shouldn't experiment though. If you feel a burning desire to write a track in the Hungarian minor scale, then be my guest. Oh, but wait, muchacho, I'm not using Windows. However will I learn all of this? I hear you cry through the fibre optics of the World Wide Web. Well, don't worry, there is an answer to that too. Now, some people might advocate for using tools within Ableton, such as the Scale tool. That will easily allow you to transpose all your MIDI notes from one key to another, but just look at it. You're not going to learn anything by staring at this small window with a few differently shaded blocks. I know I keep saying that only minimal knowledge is needed to make techno, pun not intended, but you do need to learn some of the very basics, and I just don't think by using tools such as Ableton's Scale tool that you will gain sufficient knowledge. I would, however, like to point you to a website called Chords. This site does much of what Chords does, but it will also suggest chord progressions for you. So down the left-hand side, you can select the key, the scale, and what instrument you'd like to hear as a demo. The site then suggests a few progressions for you, and you can preview each chord progression so you can get a feel for what it will sound like. If you want to know which notes appear in each chord, just hover your mouse over the chord and it will show you. Additionally, over on the far right, it also shows you all the possible chords in that key, so you literally cannot go wrong. If you want to create your own chord progressions, and you should, this will give you the building blocks with how to construct it. Could not be simpler. So let's give it a go. Here I've created a quick progression in the key of D minor, which, as you all will know, is the saddest of all the keys. The sound is from the new Audiotent binary preset pack for Arteria's Pigments. It's called Gravity. Each one of these chords is listed on the far right hand side of auto chords. All you have to do is work out which order you want to play them in. Generally speaking, melodies that descend sound sadder, and melodies that rise sound more optimistic and triumphant. This can be turned on its head when you start understanding how to resolve a melody or ask a question. Listen to these two examples. Even though in the first example, the melody kind of moves away from the opening chord, it comes back to a satisfying resolution, so it seems complete. The second example ends on quite a high note, and as such, sounds like a question being asked. If you've ever spent some time speaking to an Australian, they tend to sound like everything they're saying is a question, because their voices go up at the end. The same applies to music. The further you go down the rabbit hole of music theory, the more it becomes confusing. Then it starts to make sense. Then it becomes even more confusing. At its most fundamental level, it's mathematics. And I was terrible at that at school, so I'm not going to worry too much about the esoteric side of music theory. Let's just keep it basic. A very basic technique that is also worth knowing is understanding chord inversions. So here we have an F minor chord. This, as you can see, comprises of an F, a G sharp, or a flat, depending on your preference, and a C. A chord inversion is when you look at your root note, in this case an F, and say, "Hey little fella, do you fancy having a trip up an octave?" So you grab your F and you take it up there. The component notes of the chord can be reshuffled in any order. It will still remain the same chord, but no longer be in root position, the root being determined by the lowest note. It instead becomes what is known as an inversion. You can easily do this with every note in the chord to make similar but slight variations on the same sound. Take a listen. So they were all in F minor, but they all sounded different. This is an incredibly simple technique, but useful to know as you quickly realise that music theory isn't restrictive. It's less about confining you to only using certain notes. Once you grasp it, you'll realise that there's a lot of freedom to express yourself, and you gain a sense of freedom in knowing what chords or notes will fit into a track. An even simpler way to play chords is to use the root note, but maybe an octave below your chord like this. Here, when you change your root note, it'll make the chord that is static sound like it's moving. Take a listen. Now, where this is really useful is bass lines. Here we'll keep the melody the same. It could be this chord playing over and over, or it could be an ARP, anything where the melody doesn't change. But the bass line moves around from the root note, and it really makes a big difference. Listen as the monotony is broken when the bass line starts to evolve. I noticed Eric Prydz using this technique a lot many years ago. He would have an unbelievably repetitive melody that would get to the point where it's just about to drive you mad, but then he'd change up the bass line and it would sound incredible. Again, this is really simple stuff, but if you don't know it, you don't know it. One more tip I've got for you, and this will help anyone just starting out. Learn the minor keys first. Depending on your genre, of course, you might want to start using major keys if you're into making happy music, like upbeat vocal house. But if you're a miserable black t-shirt wearing kind of dude, minor keys will be your friend. They're sadder, more emotive, and don't sound as cheesy. So start with the minor keys, and you can make brooding pad melodies like this. And what you heard at the end there is the pitch bend. This is a powerful tool. Bending one note up or down to the next one can really help making your melodies sound less robotic and more human, if that's what you're going for. So, in conclusion, as electronic music artists, we are very, very lucky. We don't need to spend 6 months learning to play scales on a piano or learning chord changes on a guitar. We have a much simpler job. And if you just spend an hour or two practicing and learning what notes are in what key, you're pretty much set. Don't get lazy and make every track in the same key. Sit down with a fresh idea and make a track in a key you've never tried before. I'm sure this way you'll learn a lot more about its character and how much you like it. I, for one, really dislike E minor. I can't tell you why, I just really, really dislike it. There generally isn't anything more you need to know to start making decent music. If you become interested in music theory, then I encourage you to go and learn it. It'll be very rewarding. It's an amazing ability to hear music being played and know exactly what notes or chords are being played, and then you can just replicate the melodies and play it yourself. But if you're just looking to make a good techno track, knowing the very basics should be enough just to get you started. Anyway, good luck, and I'll see you next time.